It's been a long time coming, but Romeo Is a Dead Man in some ways feels like the ultimate version of what developer Grasshopper Manufacture has been working toward over the last decade. Without a doubt, this is one of the most polished games from the studio and from cult producer Suda51. Despite mid-budget production values, there was clearly a ton of effort put into this hack and slash game. Yet sometimes the title feels like it lost something along the way. As someone who's been following the studio since almost the beginning, I'm always keen to root for them, simply because they try to defy trends. But I won't lie, it's never felt like Grasshopper's work truly came together in the most satisfying way after the early 2000s. Surprisingly, in Romeo, it's the pompous style that doesn't always work. The story itself is certainly as wacky and bizarre as usual. Inspired by franchises like Rick and Morty, a decapitated cop called Romeo becomes an interdimensional space FBI agent, carrying a pseudo Doc Brown on his jacket as his sidekick while searching for his beloved Juliet, who sadly for him has become a wicked monster in most dimensions, now overrun by zombies. Just as zany as the story is the game's presentation, which made it hard to pin down at first. For one, it looked like a flashy hack and slash and third-person shooter. At the same time, the game bombards players with a barrage of different impressions, pixel art, comic book style cutscenes, manga aesthetics, as well as space shootouts. In the end though, Romeo Is a Dead Man plays pretty traditionally, and few Grasshopper games, if any, have ever been as refined as Romeo. Games like Killer 7 or The Silver Case largely ignored gaming conventions and were made on tight budgets, sometimes resulting in interesting yet undercooked systems. Whether it was the tedious levels in Travis Strikes Again or the annoying minigames, even in a big EA production like Shadows of the Damned. While Romeo Is a Dead Man once again looks unhinged, it plays far more smoothly. Armed with 4 melee and ranged weapons, you slash and shoot your way through zombie hordes for roughly 13 hours, interspersed with occasional platforming and puzzle solving. And they've now taken lessons from other titles. The hit feedback is especially satisfying thanks to over-the-top blood effects, hefty animations, and short freeze frames. You've got your standard heavy and light combos and charging attacks for which the controls work very naturally. And when it comes to healing and using buffs, they've now adopted a Souls-like approach. That said, melee combat is more engaging than shooting because the rifles are pretty standard, and destroying those ward-like weak points with firearms is less rewarding than slicing enemies up close. Enemy variety is a little thin, but the decent difficulty prevents it from becoming a bigger issue. Even though there's rarely any need to switch weapons and enemy patterns can't keep up with genre grades like Resident Evil 4, it's hard to deny that the game delivers a very satisfying carnage. Summonable zombies also provide a bit of spice, firing off various elemental attacks after a brief charging time. Meanwhile, the wacky minigames from the trailers usually appear between main missions in the hub world, which is a pixelated spaceship where you need to play Pong or Pac-Man-like minigames to activate the next area or to level up Romeo. One standout feature of the main missions is that these dungeon-like areas are split across 2-dimensional layers. When doors are locked, you need to dive into a voxel version of the level, where instead of combat, small parkour and puzzle sections break up the gameplay flow. And despite the main path being laid out by markers, this at least provides some degree of non-linearity. However, as polished as Romeo Is a Dead Man may be compared to earlier Suda titles, those older experiments were sometimes still more fascinating. They often backfired, and the studio sometimes even managed to make visual novels feel clunky. But the unusual gameplay ideas of old also resulted in memorable set pieces many times. In No More Heroes, for example, the dull overworld became a meta concept, forcing protagonist Travis to earn money for the more exciting gameplay like in real life. And Killer 7's weird rail shooter design resulted in a timeless style that remains unique. Now, the action RPG approach with Souls-like elements in Romeo is engaging, but it no longer feels radical, especially since it comes with AAA-style hint systems. This is kinda surprising to me, because not only does Suda see himself as a punk developer, but back in the day he was disheartened when EA forced him to turn his horror adventure concept for Shadows of the Damned into a traditional shooter.
最初のテレビ会議でなんで銃持たせないかって突然言ってきて、はぁと思いました。なんで銃持たない
But Romeo feels like the evolution of that game actually. Yet again, the story presentation is all the more crazy. Within the first few minutes alone, you're hit with references to Back to the Future and Blade Runner, alternative hip-hop from Japan, philosophical musings, diorama-style cutscenes, and references to older Grasshopper games. What's missing, however, is a unifying concept, like in No More Heroes for instance, where the occasional pixel art fit into the overarching otaku theme, and the strong character design elevated the low-budget graphics. In Romeo, this mishmash of styles doesn't really feel like it follows a concept. It comes across like a disjointed mix of media that Suda finds interesting. Make no mistake, their counterintuitive style of storytelling keeps things fresh. For people not familiar with the studio's prior output, this could even become a cult title, but it lacks that final connective spark. Take the boss fights. Like the rest of the gameplay, they're decent thanks to familiar evasion patterns and mechanics. Yet compared to No More Heroes, it feels like the personality is gone. Even when some aspects were awkward in older games, they led to memorable duels that rarely felt alike. Here, the space gangsters and Juliet doppelgangers usually turn into generic giant zombies that could come from almost any other monster game. This problem carries over into the aesthetics of the levels themselves, which are a far cry from the over-the-top story presentation. In fact, this might be one of Romeo's biggest shortcomings. Just as the zombies and mutants feel interchangeable, all the main areas are built from the same generic Unreal Engine assets, lacking any distinct identity, despite the wacky time travel premise. Now, just personally, I would have also liked to see Grasshopper return to more serious games. As usual, the tone becomes more ominous and dramatic toward the end. Before that, some of the strongest moments come from the dialogue aboard the spaceship, with characters like a living Roman statue, or from the mesmerizing yet never fully comprehensible anecdotes of the man in the dimensional portal. These moments are absurd and could only come from Grasshopper, and they don't feel forced or edgy. By contrast, the overt references to popular media like Rick and Morty, as well as all the grindhouse gross-out moments, have become very predictable and trite by now, and frankly they feel unnecessary. As an action game, Romeo is a breath of fresh air in the current gaming landscape, even if the mechanics aren't groundbreaking. The carnage is reminiscent of the Xbox 360 era in a good way, and its off-the-wall presentation retains a unique charm. But despite its noticeable polish, if you're familiar with the studio's previous output, it ironically feels a little predictable by now. Especially since this time, the stylistic mashup doesn't always come together.